The church was glowing that morning. White roses lining the aisle, violins whispering promise. Every seat was filled. Every head turned. But the one seat that mattered most stayed empty. My father's. When the doors opened, the crowd rose. I stood there, a bride in silk and silence, holding my bouquet tighter than my breath. People whispered, "Where's her father?" Someone muttered, "He refused, didn't he?" They were right. 2 nights before the wedding, my father, Richard Walden, CEO, self-made millionaire, perfectionist of reputation, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I won't walk you down that aisle. You're marrying beneath us. You'll embarrass this family." He said it like a verdict, not a choice. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn that man's approval. Straight A's, scholarships, a job at his firm, nothing was enough. He'd always compared me to my brother, Luke, the golden son who could crash a car and still get a new one the next day. When I told Dad I loved a man named Eli, an architect with dreams bigger than his bank account, he smiled the way people smile at children who don't know better. "He'll never give you the life I gave your mother," he said. I answered, "I don't want your life. I want mine." That was the last civil conversation we had. The night before the ceremony, Mom came to my apartment, eyes swollen from crying. "He means well," she whispered. "He just wants what's best." "No," I said quietly. "He wants control." She didn't argue. Mothers know when the truth cuts too close. At dawn, I sat alone in my dressing room, veil folded on the table, phone silent. No message. No apology. Just the hum of distance between us. Then Eli knocked softly. "You ready?" I forced a smile. Almost. When he left, I looked in the mirror, at the daughter who'd always been told she wasn't enough, and something inside me shifted. If he wouldn't walk beside me, then I'd walk myself. And I wouldn't walk, I'd arrive. I opened my laptop and called a luxury rental service. "I need a white Rolls-Royce Phantom," I said. "Today." The man hesitated. "For a wedding?" "For my wedding," I replied. Hours later, as the Rolls pulled up outside the church, cameras flashed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever seen a bride drive her own car to her own ceremony. But I stepped out calm, radiant, and utterly alone, because sometimes solitude looks like power. The whispers grew louder. "She drove herself? Where's her father? She doesn't need him." They were right about that last part. I took a deep breath, looked at the aisle stretching before me, and whispered to myself, "You've carried his name long enough. Now carry your own." Then I started walking, slowly, steadily, down the path my father refused to take. And in that moment, with every step echoing through the hall, I realized something. He hadn't disowned me. He'd freed me. After the wedding, I didn't cry. Not once. People expected me to, especially my mother, who showed up 2 weeks later with guilt written across her face. "Your father didn't mean to humiliate you," she said softly. "He's just stubborn." I looked at her, calm but certain. "Then he can be stubborn in his silence. I've got work to do." Because while the world saw a bride in a Rolls-Royce, I saw something else, a beginning. The start of my own empire. Eli and I rented a tiny studio apartment that doubled as our office. One half had our mattress. The other half had a desk, 2 laptops, and a dream that felt way too big for our space. We called it Nova House Designs, a luxury interior and architectural design firm for homes that wanted heart, not just marble. It sounded poetic. It also sounded ridiculous to everyone who heard it. When I sent out our first batch of proposals, 10 out of 10 got rejected. One investor replied, "You seem talented, but you lack experience. Maybe start small, like designing cafes or dorm rooms." I read it out loud, laughed bitterly, and whispered, "Watch me." Eli was my balance. When I doubted, he believed. When I broke, he built. And every night, when we sat under the weak glow of that single lamp, I'd sketch dream homes on scraps of paper while he figured out how to make them real. But bills didn't care about dreams. Our savings started drying up. We had to sell my wedding jewelry just to keep the lights on. And yet, I refused to ask my father for help. I'd rather start from ashes than crawl back to him. 3 months later, we landed our first client, a small restaurant owner named Rosa. She couldn't afford much, but she believed in our vision. We spent every ounce of effort on that project. Modern design, eco-friendly layout, local materials. When we unveiled the final space, Rosa cried. Not because it was fancy, because it felt like her. She posted the photos online. And within a week, we got 5 new inquiries. Within a month, 10. By the 3rd month, a celebrity chef reached out through her manager. That one deal changed everything. We went from sketching on napkins to signing contracts in glass offices. From barely surviving to being featured in City Style Weekly. The couple reinventing modern design. My father didn't call. But I knew he saw the article, because my mother sent me a message at midnight. It only said, he read it twice. Still, success didn't erase the pain. Every award, every compliment, every applause echoed with a memory of the day he refused to walk me down the aisle. But instead of letting it haunt me, I used it. Every rejection fueled my design. Every insult shaped my vision. Because sometimes, what breaks you is the same thing that builds your foundation. By the end of our 2nd year, Nova House Designs had 26 employees, 2 offices, and a waiting list of clients. Eli smiled one night as we looked out from our new penthouse balcony. He said, "You know, your dad once told me I wasn't good enough for you." I laughed quietly. He was right, because now, we're both better. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because somewhere out there, the man who refused to walk beside me was watching. And soon, he'd have to face the daughter he once called worthless. By the 3rd year, my name, not my father's, started opening doors. Investors who once ignored my emails now called me. Celebrities invited me to design their penthouses. And every magazine headline that carried Nova House felt like one small victory over every word my father ever said to break me. But success has a strange way of circling back. The same week Architectural Digest featured me on their cover, the woman redefining modern luxury. My mother called, her voice trembling. "Your father's company is in trouble," she whispered. I froze. What kind of trouble? The kind that ends careers. Apparently, his construction firm, Walden Estates, had been bleeding money for months. A bad merger. Lawsuits. Missed deadlines. For a man who once mocked me for running a garage business, irony was now eating his empire brick by brick. I didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, I asked, "Does he know you're calling me?" She hesitated. "No. He wouldn't." "Then don't," I said quietly. "Let him stand on his own." A week later, fate played its cruelest joke. The city council announced a massive redevelopment project, luxury eco-housing across the waterfront. The biggest bid of the decade. And when the list of competing firms went public, there it was, Walden Estates right above Nova House Designs. My father was competing against me. The man who said I'd embarrass his name was now fighting to keep his own alive. When we met at the bidders' conference, the room fell silent. He turned and saw me, standing tall in a tailored white suit, clipboard in hand, my wedding ring glinting under the lights. For a split second, his confident mask cracked. "Clara," he said stiffly, "I didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. "Funny, I didn't expect you to still be standing." He blinked. "You've changed." I nodded. "You haven't." Then I walked past him and handed my file to the board. It was the same board he used to dominate. Now they leaned toward me, nodding, impressed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in his shadow, he stood in mine. A week later, I got the call. "Congratulations, Ms. Walden. Nova House Designs has won the bid." I dropped my phone and laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from years of pain finally turning into power. Eli wrapped his arms around me as tears spilled down my face. "It's over," he said. "No," I whispered. "It's just beginning." Because when news broke that Walden Estates had lost to his own daughter, it went viral. Reporters called it poetic justice. Business insiders called it the changing of the guard. I just called it balance. Days later, my father showed up at my office unannounced. Same black suit. Same pride. But this time, his voice was smaller. "I didn't come to argue," he said. "I came to congratulate you." "Is that what this is?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Because you look more like a man who's drowning." He sighed. "Clara, I made mistakes. I let ego speak louder than love." "No, Dad," I said softly. "You let pride blind you. I was never beneath you. You just never looked down to see me." He didn't have an answer. Only silence. And silence, I'd learned, is the heaviest apology of all. That night, as Eli and I drove home, he glanced at me. "Do you forgive him?" I looked out the window, at the skyline I'd helped build. "I don't need to," I said. "Forgiveness is for the broken. I'm not broken anymore." The world that once laughed at me was now writing about me. The father who refused to walk beside me now watched me walk ahead. And the name I'd once carried like a burden, Walden, now belonged to me alone. 1 year later, life came full circle, only this time, I was the one choosing the venue. The city's architecture board had selected me to receive the Entrepreneur of the Year award. It was the same ballroom where my father once hosted his elite charity galas, the same hall where, years ago, I wasn't even allowed past the door because I wasn't important enough. This time, my name was on the banner outside, honoring Clara Walden, the vision behind Nova House Designs. The moment I saw it, my chest tightened, not from nerves, but from history echoing back to meet me. Eli smiled as we pulled up in front of the building. "You ready for this?" I laughed softly. "More than ready." But this night wasn't just for me. It was for every version of myself that had been told to sit down, stay quiet, or wait for permission that never came. When we reached the red carpet, cameras flashed like lightning. People shouted my name, not Richard Walden's daughter, not the rebel bride, just Clara. The valet opened the door. I stepped out slowly, and there it was again. The gleam of silver curves under the chandeliers. A white Rolls-Royce Phantom. The same model I had driven to my wedding. The same symbol of defiance that once whispered, "You don't need them." Except this time, it wasn't rented. It was mine. As I walked through the lobby, I could feel every gaze follow me, not with judgment, but with awe. Because I wasn't the girl they whispered about anymore. I was the woman who made them listen. Inside, the ballroom was filled with the city's most powerful names, investors, designers, politicians, and near the center table sat my parents. My father looked older, humbled. He didn't stand when I entered. He didn't have to. The look in his eyes said everything words couldn't. Pride. Regret. Realization. When the announcer's voice echoed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's honoree, Ms. Clara Walden." The applause thundered so loudly, I could barely hear myself think. But I saw my father's face clearly through it all. I walked to the stage, my heels steady, my breath even, and said into the microphone, "Thank you. A few years ago, someone told me I'd embarrass my family. That I'd fail because I chose heart over hierarchy. Tonight, I stand here not in defiance, but in gratitude. Because sometimes, rejection is the most powerful fuel." The audience went silent, listening, leaning in. I learned that no one defines your worth but you. And when they won't walk beside you, you walk yourself, even if you have to drive your own Rolls-Royce to do it. Laughter. Applause. A standing ovation. And then, something I didn't expect. My father rose to his feet, the first to clap. Tears shimmered in his eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not as the man who broke me, but as the man who finally understood me. After the ceremony, he approached slowly. No bodyguards, No arrogance, no pretense. Just a father and a daughter standing on even ground. You were right, he said quietly. You didn't need me to walk you down the aisle. You were always walking towards something greater. I smiled gently. And you were always too busy looking backward to see it. He nodded, accepting the truth. Can I at least ride with you now? He asked, half smiling. I gestured toward the Rolls parked outside. Get in, I said. But this time, I'm driving. We both laughed. And as the doors closed and the city lights reflected off the hood, I realized that sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't victory, it's peace. Because I didn't need to win against him anymore. I'd already won within myself. The night after the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. The city outside was still glowing, the applause still echoing faintly in my mind. But beneath all the noise, there was a quiet peace, the kind that comes only when every wound has turned into wisdom. I walked out onto the balcony of our penthouse. The skyline shimmered, each tower reflecting a piece of my story, the fall, the rise, the resilience. Behind me, Eli stepped out, wrapping a shawl over my shoulders. Still thinking about him? He asked. I nodded slightly. You don't just forget the first person who told you you'd never be enough. You just stop needing them to be wrong. He smiled softly. You made peace tonight, Clara. Maybe, I said. But peace is strange. It doesn't roar like success, it whispers. The next morning, I visited the one place I hadn't seen since that day, the church where my first wedding should have been perfect. The same aisle I once dreamed of walking down on my father's arm. It was empty now. Quiet. The scent of flowers had faded long ago, replaced by dust and stillness. I stood there for a moment, alone, the faint light from the stained glass painting colors across my face. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. Because if he hadn't refused to walk me down that aisle, I might never have learned how to walk on my own. I whispered into the stillness. Thank you, Dad. For breaking me just enough to